Welcome to lecture CO3 skeleton wood construction. With this sample, I'm going to dig into skeleton wood construction from, say, historical background, but also the current and the up-to-date solution. It starts with the Middle Ages timber stick buildings, which we all know. The middle picture, which we see here, is a so-called Normannic timber structure. We see there's a main structure which has a certain height, and then the floors are horizontal broad into this system, versus the Alemannic timber structure, far right setup, where we see that the main structure is brought in position, then the floor is brought on top and it's actually cantilevering a bit, and then the next level is installed, and then the next one is again cantilevering a bit to allow the structure to, say, expand dimension, but also to decrease the sizes of the horizontal beam. The infill in these systems are normally done with a timber infill cladded with an outer and an inner layer of clay, and then windows are windows where they're supposed to be in these system. A typical, let's say, construction way how this is done, we see very nicely the details, all these craftsman components being connected, being brought in position, and then fixed with some timber bolts. General setup as we see it here is a main structure, an outer and an inner layer to envelope the facade. We can envision that we do the infill either, as explained, with a clay-like system, as we see it here, which has the advantage of being just one layer, which has the disadvantage of being, influenced by the elements, rain, and needs to be refurbished very frequent, which may end up, especially exposed situation, that we clad it with a timber shingle layer, like we see it here, which then has a stick system at its back as a main system, an additional raincoat which is added to the structure. When we dig into modern skeleton wood structures, we see these type of balloon frame structures. We see a main frame made out of timber. We see that main frame is then closed with an inner layer and outer layer of wood. We see the inner layer, we see the outer layer of wood. We also see that there are some foils, breathable at the outside, airtight at the inside being positioned, and then there's maybe an additional layer of cladding, which we see here in this sample, maybe an additional layer of cladding positioned, and there's another inner layer which we see here, which I'm going to talk about in a minute more. We see the whole building being wrapped with the outer foil, breathable as a system, and then the cladding appears. It may be positioned on such a cladding system in prefabricated units with then, in this sample, ceramic tiles being added at the outside. When we dig into these systems, when we try to identify the layers, we have the main structure here. This takes the dead loads, and then we have the insulation layer, which is this part, insulation layer. We have an inner layer which is supposed to be rain-tight, airtight as a system, so entirely sealed as a system. We have an outer layer of cladding to be the, say, structural, also part of the structural component, but enveloping the facade. And then there's a breathable foil at the outside. There should be a breathable airtight foil at the inside. Then there comes the cladding system at the outside. It's in that case a ventilated facade system, as we know it already from the solid structures. And then there's an inner structure, as this is airtight. We may not create openings for electricity devices, for example, so we may not penetrate this airtight sealant surface, and if we do so, we will create air leakages, which in the end will also transfer humidity in the system, which we don't want. So to prevent that, we'd like to have an additional layer of structure, which is purely an inner layer of plaster, of plywood, of gypsum board, whatever, to create the inner surface, to allow that any penetration with electricity devices can be done in this layer without penetrating the airtightness layer in this setup, as a general, say, strategy for these type of systems. See on the left side the entire system as it is drawn, and here a sample concept house in Rotterdam. as object which is done in this type of structure. This about wooden structures. Again, we have some literature as we always have. And again, I'm going to stop this lecture here.